Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Bullony Basketball. As you guys know, I'm here with Johnny. How's it going, Johnny?
We're back. That's about. I'm excited, man. I'm excited to be back talking some basketball. We're actually seeing some real basketball happen. Granted, it's been scrimmages thus far, but it seems like the bubble's been working. And we're just about ready to get into some real basketball. So couldn't be any more excited to be here.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be crazy. Obviously, we've already seen what no fans is gonna look like, so it's gonna be weird. But at least the NBA is back, so that's the biggest thing here. But obviously, like you said, we've been seeing scrimmages and stuff like that. Let's just kind of discuss what we think are the most interesting parts of the scrimmages so far. I don't know if you wanted to go first or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I guess just some of the things I was noticing while I was watching through them and seeing some highlights aren't necessarily super basketball related. The first one is those new camera angles. So I think they call it the rail camera that basically just follows the player along the sideline. So it kind of gives you an NBA 2K camera angle if you so choose. And then the other thing I've been watching has been players coming back post-injury or new signings. So JR and Dion on the Lakers, seeing Noah play with the Clippers. Then you got Oladipo coming back from injury. Whether or not he's going to play in the regular season is to be determined. And guys like Nurkic and Collins coming back for the Trailblazers. So kind of just seeing the cohesion of these teams after having this long break. And then the last thing, I'm sure you saw this, and I'm sure a lot of people did because this was all over social media. How about that Nuggets starting lineup where they went all bigs, where it was Grant, Millsap, Jokic, Plumlee, and Bol. I thought that was kind of hilarious to watch. And Bol did play very well, but I don't really want to overreact to it. But those are kind of the three things that I found to be very interesting as I watched the scrimmages.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest thing that I noticed about the Nuggets. And that's going to be interesting. Now, I know obviously they're going to have Jamal Murray, they're going to have Gary Harris and stuff like that, but if they even tried a lineup like that, and right now, they'd be facing the Nuggets if the season ended today, or they'd be facing the Rockets would be their matchup. But anyways, that'd be interesting. A 6'5" PJ Tucker is the tallest guy on their team as opposed to 6'7" or 6'8" Paul Millsap for the Nuggets lineup. That would make it probably the most interesting first round series you could ask for. Like you said, the cohesion's kind of the biggest thing. I thought the Trailblazers looked pretty decent. I thought the Pacers looked pretty good. We've seen Ben Simmons playing the 4 as well. He even hit a 3, which, is this a sign? Is he going to start shooting more threes? Maybe, we don't know. But yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see. And then there's some teams that you think again, it's why did they bring them? The Wizards, the Nets, and I feel bad for a guy like Jamal Crawford who got signed by the Nets just for these 8 games and whatever their postseason is going to be, and he hasn't even gotten a chance. So that's kind of the things I was looking at. And also Joakim Noah has been playing good. I know you touched on that, but I like seeing the former Bulls players play well. So yeah.
Yeah, a couple things to piggyback off of what you've been saying. You mentioned the Trailblazers and the Pacers playing well. The things that we just have to remember, and I know Ariza hasn't been playing with the Blazers right now, but he's sitting out because of that whole court custody battle for his son. So that's a big loss for Portland because I thought that he was probably going to step in and be their best 3 or 4 basically behind or after CJ. It was going to be him or Melo. So that's a big loss. And then for the Pacers, we got news that Sabonis is out with, I believe it's a leg injury, but it's going to cost him probably the whole season. And then the Philadelphia 76ers, I think moving Simmons to the 4 is a great move. It allows more shooting in the lineup if you bring Shake Milton in, and then it brings Al Horford to the bench. So what that does is that brings some depth off the bench. So I think this may be their optimal lineup. What's going to be interesting is seeing how they close games, because a lot of teams don't necessarily close games the same way they start them. So it's going to be weird to see if they do go back to their original starting 5 at the end of games.
Yeah, and it's actually I feel usually with teams that have dysfunction, there's always one shining bright spot for every team. And I think for the Sixers, it's been Shake Milton. I think he's had a pretty solid year. He's shown potential and flashes in multiple games that he can be a quality starting point guard for the team. Maybe not like Ben Simmons or anything like that, like not an all-star, but he can at least, hold his ground. And then putting Ben Simmons at the 4 is definitely interesting. I mean, it kind of has like some vibes of Blake Griffin in a sense because he's pretty athletic. But, I mean, if he starts shooting threes and he's able to knock down the 3 too, then that makes him even more deadly. And it probably could somewhat like save their season. I mean, their season's kind of been pretty disappointing for the most part this year.
Yeah, and Shake Milton coming in at the point guard doesn't necessarily mean that he's just their primary playmaker. But what it does is having him bring the ball up, the pick and roll with him and Embiid or him and Tobias Harris is much more effective because now you can't just go under the screen because Shake Milton is a great three-point shooter. When you're running that with Ben Simmons, you go under the screen, you dare him to shoot. There's nothing to it. Now this pick and roll can be a lot more potent, more deadly, and especially if Embiid is the one that's setting the pick or setting the screen, then you can still have Simmons down low, and he's not going to be clogging the lane with both him and Embiid. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree with that pretty much, but we're going to move on to predicting the awards for this year. I mean, we kind of talked about them, I feel like, the last episode, like before the season like completely shut down or whatever. But, I mean, now they said that they're not going to include these 8 games in the awards decisions. So now that that's all said, we pretty much already know what we have to go off of. And we can go through the main 6 awards. I think for MVP, I don't know. I think this should be kind of obvious, but what do you have?
I mean, I don't see a way in which it's not Giannis Antetokounmpo. Given that given that they've given us the criteria telling us exactly when the last game was that we're supposed to be judging it off of, best record in the NBA, basically, leads his team in all 5 main categories. I don't think there's much more to it. I mean, it's got to be Giannis, doesn't it?
Yeah, I also have Giannis. I know there's other people that have made a good case. Obviously, what LeBron's doing at age 35, what Kawhi has done. I know he's missed some games, but he's still been pretty solid all year. James Harden, Luka. But I don't think anyone compares to like what Giannis is doing. Like you said, he's leading his team in almost every single category. His PER is off the charts, something that we haven't seen in a while. I think that he pretty much has the award wrapped up.
I don't know. I don't know if it's just me, but I don't get the whole LeBron at age 35 as part of his MVP case. Why are we throwing age into this? MVP, most valuable player, best player of the year. I don't think that we should be saying, because he's age 35 and doing this, he deserves it. It should just be based on what he's doing without age being a constraint or being something that we take into consideration.
Yeah, I don't really agree with that too much either. I know I was saying it because, that's kind of like what the whole narrative is. It's because if you look at really what the Lakers are doing, I mean, Anthony Davis is leading them in 4 of the 5 statistical categories. But, I mean, I think LeBron, he's played very good all year. He's still, I believe, top 10 in scoring, and he's leading the league in assists per game. So, I mean, with that taken into account, he's definitely up there. But I don't see how, the age factor of being 35 years old is enough to put him in the conversation with what Giannis is doing when he's having, like, a historical season.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to knock LeBron in any way, because to me, he's the clear number 2 in this race. And I do still think that he is more valuable than AD, even though AD is leading that team in 4 out of the 5 main categories. But I have a sneaky suspicion that AD is going to come up in the list. So who is your defensive player of the year?
My defensive player of the year, it's pretty interesting. Anthony Davis is definitely up there for me. Of course, Rudy Gobert's up there every year, but I actually also went with Giannis for my defensive player of the year. I think it's pretty close, but I went with Giannis too.
Okay, yeah, so I did go with Anthony Davis. I think it's kind of a 4-way race. I think it's between AD, Giannis, Gobert, and then Ben Simmons. I don't think he gets talked about enough in this race. Versatile defender, just like I guess Rudy Gobert isn't as versatile as the other 3, but between AD, Ben Simmons, and Giannis, they can basically guard all 5 positions, so that really helps them. But I think what Anthony Davis is doing this year on the defensive end, I just think it's too much compared to everybody else. So I did go with him for Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, this might be one of the hardest awards because there's no clear-cut decision. I know Giannis, I believe, is leading AD and most of the advanced analytics for the defensive side of the floor. But, I mean, ultimately, the Lakers' defense with Anthony Davis has been insane. And the way that he's kind of locked down like a lot of the premier players in the league at his position. So I could see either side of it. Personally, I'm going to take Giannis, though, but I think those are probably the top two for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree for sure. Now, heading on to Rookie of the Year, I assume that this is a two-man race. Which way did you lean?
I would probably consider it a one-man race. I mean, no offense to Zion. I think he's been, he's been great. He's been the best rookie this season. But playing 19 games, I don't think that's going to be enough. Ja Morant, he's played almost every single game for the Grizzlies. And at the time that the mark happened for when they're going to cut off the awards, I mean, he had him in the playoff picture. So I think with that being considered, Ja Morant has to be Rookie of the Year. But I would still say that Zion is, the better player between the two.
And I do, too, consider it a one-man race. But looking around social media, even some of the bigger names on ESPN, just because of the name Zion Williamson, they make it a two-man race. But I do see the total body of work that needs to be included. And you can't understate the fact that Zion did only play in 17 games. Now, had he played the full season, it probably would have been him. Because what he did do in those 17 games was better than what Ja has been doing all year. But when you account for the total body of work, it does have to be Ja.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it as well. But moving on to Sixth Man of the Year, I don't know who you have for this, but my pick personally, I have Dennis Schroeder of the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think also the Clippers, Montrezl Harrell, is probably the runner-up in my opinion. Of course, Lou Williams is in there as well, but it's really weird because you don't see a Sixth Man of the Year race where it's like they have got two guys on the same exact team coming off the same bench. So like Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell both in the race. But I don't really think the Thunder are entirely deep, and what Dennis Schroeder's done this year and where the Thunder are sitting, I think that it has to be him in my opinion.
So I went with the guy who is currently mandated with a 10-day quarantine for deciding to pick up dinner in a gentleman's club when he went home. Lou Williams, that is. I just think that what he's done, what he brings to this Clippers team, a team that's already very deep, I get that. But he is that true sixth man. Even if he isn't the first one off the bench, I do think he's more valuable than Montrezl Harrell. And I would consider it between Lou Will and Dennis Schroeder, because what Schroeder's been doing this year has obviously been great as well. Probably would start on most teams, as would Lou Will. But they've both adopted their in such a great way that they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. But I just lean Lou Will.
Personally, for me, I think two things will factor in. Maybe Lou Williams might be the better pick than Montrezl Harrell, but in terms of like who's more likely to get it, I don't think he has a better chance than Harrell getting it because, I mean, this is Montrezl Harrell's best season of his career, and Lou Williams, I know he's won it the last 2 years. I think this season has been his worst of the past three, and along with that, like, voters' fatigue always plays a factor. So, if it's not like some extraordinary season by Lou Williams, then it's probably not going to be him winning the award. And I mean, the fact that both of them are on the same team that's what it is for MVP race most of the time, isn't it? I mean, the Lakers have two of the top 5 players in the league, arguably, with LeBron and AD, but Giannis' next best player is Chris Middleton, who might be, a top 20 player in the league or so, top 25. So I think that has to play a factor, and that's why I'm picking Dennis Schroeder.
And like you said earlier, has there ever been a time that two of the top 3 vote getters in the Sixth Man of the Year award are on the same team? Because to me, that's just crazy.
I think actually there was another time, and I think it was just recently. I think when Eric Gordon won it, I believe Lou Williams was a candidate that year too, and they were both on the Rockets. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure Lou Williams was also a candidate, and I know Eric Gordon won it, but that might be. I mean, it's not like a typical thing. You don't really see it that often.
Yeah, I was trying to do some quick research, but I wasn't able to come up with anything. But either way, it's just one of those things that you don't see very often, so it is tough to judge when it does come up.
Yeah, I agree. But moving on to most improved player, there's a lot of candidates, I think, for this. There might be two at the top, I'd say, but who do you have?
Yeah, so early on, to me, it was Brandon Ingram, and I was like, oh, he's going to run away with this. And then as the season progressed, it just seemed like everybody kept coming up on his tail. Jaylen Brown, Luka Doncic, Bam Adebayo. And by the end of the year, I think I had to go with Bam Adebayo. Basically putting up 15, 10, and 5, what he's done for that Miami team. I mean, Brandon Ingram, all-star, both of them all-stars for that matter. So it's hard to discredit either of them. Luka Doncic, I know he was great his rookie year, but now he's a top 5 MVP candidate, so he got to be considered for this award. But you generally don't see that type of player get much consideration, so I did go with Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, I also go with Bam on this one. I don't remember who I picked at the very beginning of the year for this award. I think I might have picked like Bam or maybe like someone from Orlando. Maybe like Jonathan Isaac or Markelle Fultz or something. But yeah, I'm going to go with Bam still. I think Ingram is the number 2 spot on this list. Obviously, I mean, there's some other guys that would have consideration, but I don't think anyone really comes close to those two. I mean, Bam, I know part of his success has been alongside Jimmy Butler and what he's brought to the Heat, but I think also the fact of him like stepping into the role of Hassan Whiteside and actually like making use of it, and now they're like an elite team. They're like a contender. So I would probably take Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, I mean, his playmaking has drastically improved. Great defender, versatile. Other names to consider that are a bit below those two, you got Malcolm Brogdon. So there's never a shortage of candidates in this award. It's just a matter of how close they are to the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, I agree. And then as for Coach of the Year, this one might be the least decided. I feel like there's a lot of different candidates for this, but who do you have for Coach of the Year?
Yeah, so I actually didn't go with either of the coaches who are currently coaching the top team in each conference. I actually went with Nick Nurse of the Toronto Raptors. So second place in the East. A year after losing Kawhi, Marc Gasol missed a lot of time this year. OG Anunoby missed a lot of time this year. I mean, to have this team second in the West, yeah, he still has great players. He still has Pascal Siakam. He still has Kyle Lowry. But guys like Fred VanVleet have gotten much better. They're playing guys like Terrence Davis and Chris Boucher. To be second in the East behind the Bucks, I don't know if many coaches could replicate what Nick Nurse has done this year. So I think he deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, I also went with Nick Nurse on this, but I think other coaches, I mean, obviously Billy Donovan deserves some credit for what he's done with the Thunder. After basically it seemed like he was going to be out the door. And then also, Eric Spoelstra, he's almost up there every single year. But, and the Heat's completely been transformed from last year being a non-playoff team. But, I mean, like you said, I mean, they lost Kawhi, they lost Danny Green. I know they won the title last year, but, I mean, still, that was like a lot of different pieces. I mean, their offseason, looked horrible. I mean, they got, Stanley Johnson and then Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, I believe, were their big acquisitions, and yet they're still sitting in the same spot in the standings they were last year and a championship contender. So I think all that considered, that's my pick for Coach of the Year.
And you're obviously going to give some consideration to guys like Mike Budenholzer or Frank Vogel just because of what they have done. And yes, they have great teams, but it's never a shoo-in to be the top team in each conference. But I still do just lean towards Nick Nurse.
Yeah, I agree. I think we disagreed on Defensive Player of the Year, 6-man. Was that it? I think that might have been it.
Yeah, I think that's all.
Okay, so for the most part, I mean, we were on the same page. But, yeah, we're going to move on to the next topic. Now, this doesn't really have anything to do with the current NBA, just another topic to talk about. about all-time NBA, and that's about Joe Johnson, who, I mean, in the Big Three last year, he seemed like someone who would definitely get an NBA roster spot. He got signed by the Pistons, but then like waived before the season even started. But looking at his career, I mean, how underrated do you think Joe Johnson was?
Yeah, so I went to Basketball Reference, which for you guys listening, if you don't know what that is, it's basically the do-all, tell-all for basketball history. Basically, anything you want to find in basketball history, you can go there. And I kind of just wanted to scroll through Joe Johnson's page. So looking at his basic accomplishments, 7-time All-Star. He was part of the All-Rookie team. He was All-NBA one year, 2009, 2010. In his prime years with Atlanta, he made 6 All-Star teams during those years. He was averaging 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists. So it's a pretty good, set of statistics. Not, but that's right up there with some of the better ones in the league. And then what Basketball Reference does is for players that have retired, they take their, they basically compare them to other players and rank them up there with players who have a similar career score, they call it. So basically win share each year, who they follow a trajectory with. And so he's right up there with the Michael Finleys, Dennis Johnsons, and Mark Jacksons of the world. That's good company, right? Dennis Johnson from the Boston Celtics on those great teams. Michael Finley was one of the better players on those Dallas Mavericks teams. Then you got Mark Jackson. The one knock I have with Joe Johnson is just what he did in the playoffs. And it's not that he never won. It's just that his numbers always decline in the playoffs. That is points. That is win shares per 48. So the things that made Joe Johnson, he just didn't do as well in the playoffs in the big games.
Yeah, and if you guys are new here listening, that's probably Johnny's favorite statistic is similarity scores. Almost every time we bring up players, you bring it up. But I think also he was pretty underrated. I mean, like you said, he was like a 7-time All-Star. I also found he was one of 14 players in history to have 20K points, 5K assists, and 5K rebounds. And the other 13 are players in the Hall of Fame, or they're pretty much going to be in the Hall of Fame, like LeBron, Russell Westbrook. And to be in that company, I mean, that's pretty exclusive. I think he is one of the more clutch players of the past decade. I can't even tell you how many clutch shots that he hit. There's literally like too many to count. I think part of the reason, though, maybe his playoff numbers weren't as great is because when he first got to Atlanta, they weren't really a great team. I know they had like a young Josh Smith. They had like Marvin Williams, like Josh Childress and stuff like that. So they weren't really like a crazy great team. But I think Joe Johnson in his prime was definitely something that's pretty underrated. I believe he averaged like 25, 5, and 5 one year. Like, that's insane. And it's really going to be interesting to see if he ends up in the Hall of Fame. Because, I mean, 7 All-Star appearances, I mean, you'd think that's a Hall of Fame player. But I don't know if he will get in. Do you think he'll get in or no?
I don't know. I think it's so close just because he only does have one appearance on the All-NBA team. And he never did win anything big, right? So in terms of his accomplishments, he's not up there. He has the stats, but I just don't know if his stats are good enough to override the fact that he doesn't have those accomplishments or accolades.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe last year on the Hall of Fame list, they picked a bunch of guys from a long time ago. Like, I believe they picked, like, Jack Sikma. I can't even think of all of them right now. But, like, they picked, like, a bunch of guys from a long time ago and put them in the Hall of Fame that I feel like hadn't even got, like, much of a chance in a long time. So maybe that time could come. Ultimately, I don't think he definitely won't be a first ballot Hall of Famer for sure, but maybe sometime down the line, if they do that and they look at Joe Johnson, then I could see him maybe getting in.
Yeah, a part of it depends on which class we classify him in, so when he'd be inducted. But just reminiscing on those teams, those early Atlanta Hawks teams with him and Josh Smith, those were some fun teams to watch, man.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people don't really talk about those teams either, but they were definitely a team that you had to tune into every single night. But we're going to move on to the next topic, and this is kind of like another what if or possibility of something in the future. And that's the Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, they have Karl Anthony Towns. They just traded for D'Angelo Russell this season. And, I mean, with Devin Booker on the Suns, likely to miss the playoffs for the 5th year in a row, and maybe one day he could request a trade to Minnesota, possibly. But what do you think about a trio of Cat, Russell, and Booker? Do you think it's even possible? And how good do you think they'd be?
So it's been talked about for a while, right, that those three do want to play together. So I don't necessarily think that it's one of those things that's not realistic, but I just don't know how good they'd be. I mean, excuse me, you have three very, very big defenders there. You know, D'Lo's not playing any defense, Booker isn't playing any defense, and neither is Cat. What you have is a very firepower offense because all three can shoot, all three can make plays. So a lot of their success would really be down to what kind of role players they get. You know, they need, because you got D'Lo playing the one, Booker would be your two, Cat would be your center. So you need two wings on that team. You need like 3-and-D wings. You need guys like Robert Covington or something like that to kind of fill in the cracks, because this team is going to be terrible on the defensive end.
That would be something for Robert Covington because, I mean, he started with the Rockets, was on the Sixers, went to the Timberwolves, goes to the Rockets, back to the Timberwolves. That would be, like, just so weird. But anyways, I think for the Timberwolves' sake, personally, I'm really high on a guy like Malik Beasley, and I feel like if any trade was going to get Devin Booker to Minnesota, he would almost have to be included. I don't see that many possible trade pieces that the Timberwolves could use that the Suns would be interested in to give up Devin Booker for. In terms of like veterans or something they could sign, it would have to be people that are probably pretty old that would be on like minimum contracts at that point if they're going to pay Towns, D'Lo, and Booker. But I don't know how great they'd be either. I think they'd be, I mean, it is the Western Conference, so it's definitely tough, but they could be a playoff team, but they might not even be in the West today. They might not be more than a first round exit, honestly.
Yeah, they just don't stack up with those teams. Because if this happens in the next couple of years, the Clippers are still going to be good, the Lakers are going to be good, the Nuggets are going to be good, the Rockets are going to be good. So I don't even see them being better than those four teams. So just off the bat, they're a bottom half playoff team in the West. I don't give them a great chance to win.
Yeah, and I mean, just like we said with Josh Smith and Joe Johnson on those Hawks, I mean, they weren't like a great team, but they'd be a fun team to watch. I think this Timberwolves team would be a fun team to watch, but I don't know if they'd ever make it that far unless, someone became an elite defender out of the blue. Like, I mean, Towns has gotten a little bit better, but I think D'Lo or Booker, one of them would definitely have to make a jump.
Yeah, a big jump that is too, because like I said, I just don't see how they stack up. D'Lo's clearly the third best player on this team. Cat and Booker are right around that top 20. So in terms of like their rankings, they're up there. I just don't know how well they fit together.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely fair. But we're gonna move on to our daily picks. Yes, the daily picks are back. I believe it's been like about 16 weeks or so, like 4 months or something. But obviously the NBA is returning this week, so we have more picks to make. Starting off on July 30th, which is, the reopening day per se, we have the Clippers versus the Lakers. Who are you taking on this one?
Yeah, this is going to be a fascinating matchup. One of the first games we're going to see. Even though there's no Lou Williams, I'm still going to take the Clippers. Lakers were playing so well before the break, but now you're adding in two new guys in Deion Waiters and J.R. Smith. You don't have Avery Bradley, so I'm not sure how the cohesion is going to be there, so I'm going to stick with the Clippers.
Yeah, and I think the Lakers, I think they kind of needed more of a time at the beginning of the season earlier. I think they needed like a little bit more time to gel. Like I don't think the Clippers really, like, they're just kind of going to go with the flow per se. I'm going to take the Clippers, but I mean, I'm not expecting like the Lakers to be like fumbling their games in this 8-game stretch. But moving on to the next one, we have the Grizzlies and the Trailblazers
on
July 31st. Who do you got?
Yeah, I have Portland. I think they're going to come out firing, right? This is one of their most important games because beating the Grizzlies basically bumps you up 2 games, and that you go up 1 and the Grizzlies go down 2. They do also have to leapfrog the Pelicans. So I think that this is going to be one of those games that Dame comes out and basically just shows up Ja Morant.
Yeah, I also have Portland winning this one. I think definitely having those bigs back as well, Nurkic and Collins, like we mentioned earlier, I think it's definitely going to help them out. I know they're not, like you said, they're not gonna have a Ariza, but I think it's still gonna help them out. I think the Grizzlies, I know it's still preseason and it's not, or whatever, scrimmages, but you can't take everything 100% serious. But they haven't really been that great either. I believe they're like 0-2 right now. So that's definitely something to look out for. I'm gonna take Portland though. I think that this is like a must win for them, honestly. They're all kind of must wins for Portland.
Because they have a bit of an uphill battle to climb to not only get within 4 games, but also leapfrog the Pelicans.
Yeah. On August 1st, though, the 76ers and the Pacers, who are you taking?
I'm going to take Philly. No Sabonis. Still don't know what Oladipo's going to be. I think the move for Ben Simmons going to the 4, I think this is a game that Philly's going to win.
I'm going to take the Pacers. I feel like most of the games that the Sixers and Pacers have played, I mean, they had Sabonis, and the Pacers did lose, I believe, more of those games. I think they might have won once. But they didn't have Brogdon. They also didn't have Oladipo. I think that both those guys being healthy is probably going to help them out, and they're going to win this game. But that's just my opinion. August 2nd, we have the Milwaukee Bucks and the Houston Rockets. Who are you taking in that one?
Yeah, I don't really take Milwaukee. I do think there's a point in the season where Milwaukee's kind of going to shut things down and rest some of their players. But I still think at this point in the season that Milwaukee's going to come out with their A team. So I'm going to take Milwaukee.
Yep, I got the Bucks too. I think that they might do that for like the last 2 or so games of the 8-game stretch. But for August 3rd, we have the Raptors and Heat. Who are you taking on this one?
Yeah, I think this is one of the more compelling matchups that we have on this list. 2 teams that have maybe overseeded expectations, if you will. Probably with Miami here. I think that this game is more critical for the Heat. They're in that battle for 3, 4, 5, 6 in the East, whereas Toronto is kind of cemented as that 2 or 3 seed. So I think Miami takes this one.
Yeah, I also have the Heat. Like you said, it's more critical for the Heat than the Raptors. Although the Raptors, they're not like 100% locked in. Of course, the Celtics are kind of close on them. It would be hard for them to overcome them, but I got the Heat winning this one. But for August 4th, we have the Mavericks and the Kings. Who are you taking in this one?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dallas here. I'm not so sure what we're going to see out of Sacramento. Long shot odds to make the playoffs, so obviously every game is very critical for them. But I think Dallas also does not want to end up in that 7 seed, right? Because they do not want to have to face the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round. So I think Dallas is going to do everything in their power to get to that 6 seed.
This might be interesting, but I'm probably going to take the Kings on this one. I mean, they have, Fox and Hield both playing. And, I mean, the Mavericks, we don't know how things are going to be necessarily with Porzingis. And the fact that the Kings are kind of like fighting for their lives every single game, too. The Mavericks, yeah, they don't want to get that 7 seed, but it's going to be really hard for them to overcome teams like the Rockets and the Jazz and the Thunder to bump up. And realistically, it still would be a hard matchup any way possible. I'm going to take the Kings on this one. But for August 5th, we have the 76ers and the Wizards. Who are you taking?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Philly here. This is like JV scrimmaging the freshman B team. Washington is without Bradley Beal. They're without John Wall. They're without Davis Bertans. This is nothing more than giving young guys 8 games to see who sticks, to see who they want to bring back next year. So I think Philly in a landslide.
I second everything you just said. August 6th, we got the Lakers and the Rockets. Who do you have winning that one?
Yeah, I'm going with the Lakers here. Even if they have the 1 seed wrapped up here, I don't think that they're going to I don't think that they're going to rest anybody, just because they do need this time. They need this time for cohesion. You know, they have 2 new guys on the team. So I think every game that they have is critical, and I think that they're going to beat the Rockets here.
Yeah, I have the Lakers too. I think it would be interesting, though, if the Rockets did beat them, because that would be twice ever since, you know, they made the Capella trade and basically went completely small that they have beaten the Lakers. So that would be kind of a concern if you're Lakers fans and you end up playing like maybe the Rockets. If Houston gets up to that 4 or 5 seed and then you face them in the second round and you haven't proven that you could beat them yet. So I'm going to take the Lakers, but that's definitely a game to look out for. And then the last game we have on August 7th, we have the Kings and the Nets, 2 teams that likely won't be doing much this postseason. But what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sacramento here. Brooklyn seems to be locked in to a playoff spot because I do not see any way in which Washington is within 4 games. And even if they are, they're certainly not beating Brooklyn twice. So, listen, Brooklyn isn't very good right now. Karis LeVert is going to be doing everything for that team, for that offense. Jarrett Allen is the only legitimate big on that team. So they don't really have a lot of things working for them. Sacramento is going to at least put out a formidable team, so I think that they're going to beat Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, the Kings are missing players, but obviously the Nets are they're missing like a team, basically. I'm going to take the Kings as well. And I mean, basically everything you just said, I would have to agree with. But that's going to do it for the show. I don't know if you have anything you want to say at the end, Johnny?
No, nothing big. Basketball's going to be back. It's coming very soon, so buckle up, because as the playoffs and the regular season comes through, we're going to be dissecting it, analyzing it, and just giving our picks the whole way through. So I'm looking forward to the future.
Yep, we got a lot of stuff that we're going to have covering with the NBA back. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and you enjoy the ones coming forward because basketball is back in session. Hope you guys enjoyed. We're out. Peace.